Picture this, you're 5 years old and your parental guardian puts on a film for you. It's a silly cartoon, it seems wholesome enough. But then less than a few minutes in, it starts getting a little bit scary.
Listen to me. No, you listen!
Well, in today's video, I'm going to be ranking the scariest moments in animated movies that were made for a family audience.
I know what you were imagining.
Before we start, I'd just like to mention, each of today's rankings are based on my own personal experience with the film. So this is going to be a subjective list. If you agree or disagree, then be sure to share it in the comment section down below. After all, each kid is different from what they take on board being scary.
I don't like you.
I've spoken to a few people who have said to me growing up they weren't particularly fazed by Watership Down, but were absolutely petrified of watching Scooby-Doo. Or in other words, I might have a bit of an odd taste.
It's very good.
By the way, I'm showing a lot of clips from Hunchback, aren't I? Which is quite ironic, as this film isn't on the list. I'm sorry. I found it more upsetting than scary as a kid.
I'm sorry, Master. I will never disobey you again.
They were just so mean to Quasi, you know? Additionally, since I'm judging these movies from what left the biggest impression on me as a kid, there aren't any movies made within the last 14 years on the list. So, sorry Laika fans, I was beyond that impressionable age by the time I saw all those films. But hey, Laika, they still do some bloody good stuff. Starting things off with Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's not entirely animated, of course, but come on, the main premise is centered around the cartoon characters. What child isn't going to watch this? Although, for myself, when I first saw the movie, I found it extremely jarring, as you've got these whimsical characters not acting so whimsical.
Aw, poor fella.
Yeah, ain't I a stinker?
Yeah, I never thought I'd ever see Mickey Mouse smiling while somebody's falling to their death. And they're in a noir storyline. Not even a noir that's been made to be kid-friendly. For me, easily the most eeriest part in the movie is the villain, Judge Doom. We never see behind his mask, but just looking into those red eyes, I think that's enough right there. Leave it up to my imagination. I don't need any more than that. Although his first demise isn't as scary as I first remember it being, I think it's down to Christopher Lloyd's acting. I wonder if he was asked to hammer up to not make it too intense for the younger viewers. Also, do I dare need to bring up about the dip? Goodness, even if you are an elasticated cartoon, nobody is safe in this movie. However, if you were anyone's nan, then the scariest part about the whole movie was all the adult jokes.
But tell me, Eddie, is that a rabbit in your pocket or are you just happy to see me?
Goodness, will anyone think of the children? The filmography from Aardman Animation has always been fairly quaint, with the exception of including some of the brash British humour.
Airship will revolutionize the fields of cartography, but mostly it's for looking down ladies' tops.
It's true! You can see down ladies' tops!
Keep peddling, Charles!
There's nothing too gnarly about their films. There have been several scenes and sequences from Wallace and Gromit that have pushed the envelope for being a little bit intense for younger viewers. But for myself, the one Aardman movie that made me a little uneasy as a wee lad was probably Chicken Run. Even though for the most part the movie is light-hearted. The opening scene with the chickens trying to break out is played quite straight to let you know on how dire the chicken situations are. As well, Edwina's death scene always left an indelible impression on me. Yes, we don't see it happening on screen, but it was a scary example of what could happen to the whole cast. And the movie never lets you forget this.
We lay eggs, day in and day out, and when we can't lay any more, they kill us.
I wouldn't be surprised if this movie converted a few kids to be vegetarians afterwards. Oh so, Mrs. Tweedy, I never liked her as a kid. She doesn't give me that vibe of that sincere woman's touch. Especially when she goes straight up psychopathic by the end. Hey, here's a family favourite of mine from the Disney catalogue, The Great Mouse Detective. With Vincent Price as your delicious Disney villain as Ratican, what more could you ask for? I love Ratican, he's easily up there in my top favourite Disney villains. His crudely involves a bat. He has quite a fair few jump scares throughout the film. The scene where Olivia is happily enjoying her time with her father, and then minutes later he's kidnapped away. That all happens before the opening titles. What a way to start your family film. This film is certainly an emotional rollercoaster throughout. Even though Ratican does pretty horrible things throughout the movie, he comes across pretty regal like an old-fashioned gentleman. That is until come by the ending, when Ratican's scheme has been foiled, and Basil is about to escape for another day. This pushes Ratican. He can't let Basil win this one. He's got to come out on top, no matter the cost of how he gets there. This is pretty psycho for a Disney villain. I saw The Adventures of Mark Twain once as a kid, and I didn't like it. And it was all down to that one scene with the angel.
What's your name? Satan.
Actually, are we even sure that's an angel? I didn't like, whatever that thing was meant to be, put the clay people through torture. That just made me upset, okay? Okay? Oh, and the plot being about Mark Twain on a mission to unalive himself. Yeah, I didn't like that as well as a kid. This movie was just too morbid for baby Scribbles. Aladdin. It has a lot of thrills, but also some very frightening moments. The build-up for actually entering into the Caves of Wonders I always found to be fairly suspenseful as a child. Before the movie even has a chance to get started, a character named Gazim is killed off at the beginning. Jesus, how dangerous is this cave? The reason he didn't make it very far into the cave was because he wasn't the so-called diamond in the rough. The one who's fated to go inside is Aladdin. Now, once you get inside the cave, it's not too bad, just as long as you don't touch the forbidden treasure. Which Abu does, and disaster happens. For baby Scribbles, this just added more nightmare fuel. And this isn't even the worst thing that happens to Aladdin in the film. Oh no, it all happens when Jafar becomes the most powerful sorcerer in the world! All of the characters we've grown to love throughout the movie are pretty much humiliated. Abu gets transformed into a toy monkey, and Carpet, well, is literally shredded. So Carpet's killed off for a short time. The Sultan is made into a puppet, more so than he was before. And Jasmine is forced to wear clothing that doesn't make her look like a feminist icon. And I believe it has inspired some rather obscene fan art on the internet. At least, according to my mum, it's horrendous. She doesn't let me look on those sites. She said that they're too naughty. Oh, and Jafar, he gets a bit more scarier by the end. Hope you lot don't have ophobia. Whenever my birthday would come back round as a kid, once a year at least some extended family member would send me a copy of We're Back, a Dinosaur story. So I had quite a fair few copies of this movie. After a while, I got very unexcited over the movie. I'm sorry to any of my extended relatives that might be watching. I know the thought does count for when it comes to a gift. But after receiving 10 copies 10 birthdays in a row, I just got really sick of this movie. But for at least the first 2 birthdays I received this film, I would watch it quite frequently, which I find quite surprising on retrospect, as this movie gave me quite a fair few nightmares. For the first half, the movie's quite fun and bubbly, but then about halfway through, the movie takes a strikingly dark turn, without much lead-in. For a while, I didn't like going to the circus, and that was all thanks to this film. A lot of stuff happens in the second act. All of our leading characters we've been following so far get transformed. And the way that Professor Screw Eyes gets finished off. It's not graphic, but it's still bloody haunting. There's no music, no loud scream, shrieking. It's quiet, atmospheric, and just chilling. I think because it wasn't so over the top, it just left a far more memorable impression on me. But when you stop and think about it, it doesn't quite make much sense. How did the crows make him disappear? Actually, does he even get killed off? He's still surrounded by paying participants, just moments before he disappears. So is this perhaps just an act he's putting on for them? I suppose in the story he's just lost his main attraction, so he's got to do something to keep the audience engaged. That's probably not what the filmmakers intended, but screw it, it's my headcanon. He didn't die, this is all part of the show, ha ha ha. In the Don Bluth classic, all dogs go to heaven. All dogs, and animals for that matter, are said to all head off to heaven. However, after our main character Charlie tempts fate and returns back to Earth, he's warned that the next time he dies, he can't return back to heaven. While in heaven, Charlie stole a pocket watch. So, just as long as he's able to still make it keep on ticking, he should be able to live on indefinitely. However, if he carelessly slips up, not only he'll die, but he'll end up in the other realm. Midway through the film, Charlie has a haunting dream of his vision when he journeys to hell. I went to a Christian school as a little boy, and this hell sequence certainly reminded me to be a good boy. As personally, I do not want to end up in that place if that's what hell looks like. One of the earliest movies I can recall watching in my youth was Pooh's Grand Adventure, about Pooh and friends misreading a letter from Christopher Robin, believing that he was kidnapped by a Scullosaurus. So they go on a rescue mission to save their beloved friend. This is one of the very few Winnie the Pooh movies where they journey outside of the 100-acre wood. Winnie the Pooh is typically quite a quaint franchise. And while this movie is sentimental at its core, with the adventure of the story, this is easily the most grand Winnie the Pooh movie of them all. The situations that Pooh and his friends get involved with, clinging on to dear life in some scenes, it's pretty suspenseful cinema for a 3-year-old. I gotta say, at that age, I didn't like Eeyore's new head decoration. Also, throughout the movie, we would periodically hear a distorted groan from an unknown entity, presumed by the characters to be the alleged Scullosaurus.
Worry no, Piglet. It's the Scullosaurus.
The Dark Crystal. I know this film isn't animated in the traditional sense like frame by frame, but the word animation means the movement of an inanimate object, and these are inanimate objects brought to life via puppetry, so it counts in my book, I think. But Dark Crystal wasn't so much of a movie that I was scared of as a young lad, but more or less fascinated by. I was a little bit older when I first saw it, about 12 or 11. It didn't quite leave that same fearful impression on me, in the same way with a lot of other people. I'm sure if I was younger, I would find the movie much more terrifying, but I certainly was still aghast at some of the more intense moments. By the way, my mind was absolutely boggled when I first saw the ending for the first time. Like, what on earth was going on? I will admit, Dark Crystal is certainly not everybody's cup of tea, but I love it. When I was a child, I was a big dinosaur lover. Any movies or shows that had a dino in it, I had to watch it. One movie that I really wanted to watch was Disney's Dinosaur. For a number of years, my only reference to the movie was just the teaser, the one that showed the opening of the movie. I used to watch it again and again on the VHS tape of Inspector Gadget. And while I was, for the most part, fairly mesmerised, one part of the trailer that gave me continuous nightmares was the scene that included the predatory dinosaur of the film, Carnosaurus. That sequence was basically how most of my dreams ended as a kid. I was so terrified of the Carnosaurus that I always envisioned that was the monster lurking around in the dark in my bedroom. How exactly a massive dinosaur would be able to hide in a child's bedroom, I don't know. Eventually, my parents got me the movie on DVD, and between the ages of 6 and 9, I watched it religiously. I'd frequently get up early in the morning so I could watch it before school. It's really funny looking back on hindsight on how much I loved this movie, as finally being able to watch the rest of it, it gave me even more nightmare fuel. And just mere seconds later, you can see that Carnosaurus in the background devouring its prey. So either it was a quick death, or they're being eaten alive. I suppose if you were to rank them as Disney villains, they're certainly the most animalistic. I suppose since all the characters are literally animals, it probably gives the filmmakers a little bit more lenience to put the dinosaurs in more dramatic situations. Like, I love Hunchback, but you couldn't so flawlessly put Quasimodo in a fight scene like this without upping the age rating. Over the years in our pop culture landscape, Bambi has frequently been taken for granted for being a very wholesome film. And while yes, the first half of the movie focuses on Bambi's innocent days as a calf, Bambi is cautionally taught about the dangers that he'll be facing in the forest.
You must never rush out on the meadow. There might be danger.
As for any small child that's taught about stranger danger or the concept of death, we take these morals for granted. However, that changes for when we reach a certain age, or perhaps when we've had a big emotional shake-up in our life. When Bambi loses his mum, those light-hearted scenes that were so prominent in Bambi gradually dissipate throughout the last third of the film. Bambi slowly is put through tremendous loopholes to get through to the end, from claiming his mate to straight up survival. Everybody talks about the death of Bambi's mum, but Bambi getting shot near to the end always seems to get overlooked. and the whole story is told from the perspective of an animal. It's not like a human story where we're all treated to respite if we're having a tough time. In this situation, Bambi doesn't have friends or family to fall back on in the same sense as we do. The only thing his father can do is to plead with him to get back up.
Get up! You must get up!
If you want to live a long life in the forest, you've got to withstand quite a lot.
For of all the deer in the forest, not one has lived half so long. He's very brave and very wise.
This is the closest movie that Walt Disney ever made to a film like Watership Down or Animal Farm. In fact, there are a few scenes in Bambi that would fit in quite well with either one movie.
He's almost here. I can't stand it any longer.
In fact, if you took Animal Farm, made in Walt Disney's lifetime, if you redid Bambi where you didn't have as many incidental moments, and Bambi wasn't afraid to show a dead carcass on screen, then I don't think it would be that far removed from Animal Farm. From Bambi to its 90s equivalent, The Lion King. I don't know if I would call the movie my favourite animated feature from the Disney canon, but I certainly would contribute to the minority of calling this the best Disney animated movie, or at the very least say that Disney hasn't quite replicated a movie quite like this one since. Its legacy is understated. When the film was released, it was an event. For me at least thematically, it feels like one of the most maturest and grandest animated movies made. The story is so classical upon itself that you could easily put it alongside other storylines such as the Ten Commandments or Jason and the Argonauts. It wouldn't be too out of place. And just like any story of a hero's journey, it's not an easy one. Simba nearly savagely gets murdered by the hyenas, and this is before we get to the main heart of the film. Unlike Bambi, the animals in this movie are more anthropomorphized, so we have a much more sincere relationship between Mufasa the dad and his son Simba, making it all the more devastating when Simba sees his dad falling to his death. It's a preference, but I personally find this much more devastating than Bambi. The movie feels like if they did remake Bambi for a contemporary audience. For the character of Scar, he's the closest Disney villain to almost get away with his conniving scheme, as he ruled over Pride Rock for goodness knows how long before Simba came back to the picture. Like he was in power just long enough to completely spoil the land. That is pretty corrupt. He is well ruled with such an iron fist that he was, well, a straight up dictator.
No, I would never have had to do this for Mufasa.
But you know the law. Never ever mention that name in my presence.
If you were half the king Mufasa was, you
I'm 10 times the king Mufasa was.
It's always far too easy to say with kids' films that they don't make them like they used to. And while I would somewhat softly agree that a movie made 50 plus years ago wouldn't be made the same way now.
Fortune cookie, always wrong. Not the hard one.
But for those who would argue that back in the good old days, every animated movie was made like The Lion King, if you take a look at the other animated movies released that year, they certainly don't quite hold a candle in the same way like Lion King. Like I said, Lion King was an event, and every 10 years we do get that one event movie. Certainly Disney and other animation studios has certainly tried to make a film on the same par like LK. 2010's The Legends of the Guardians, for me, has come the closest into matching the grandness of The Lion King. I guess with Zack Snyder as your director, don't expect the fight scenes to be too subtle. Made by Animal Logic, the same team that brought us the Happy Feet movies, it seems like that they were on a real roll of animal-centric films. dealing with themes and topics in a mature way. (1982's) The Secret of NIMH, the directorial debut of Don Bluth and Gary Goldman. It was their first feature film, and many argue that NIMH was easily their best body of work. It's not my personal favourite Bluth movie, but I'm not going to pretend that I don't understand where people are coming from. The movie offers many intriguing ideas and concepts, but at its core, it's a humble story about Mother Mice, Mrs. Brisby, trying to safely move her sick son, little Timmy, out of the field before the harvest. Her journey of seeking help isn't easy. She goes to ask the wisdom of the great owl for help, but before she's even given a chance to speak to him, she's tracked down by a spider. And when she meets the great owl, he's not the most regal of gentlemen. The great owl certainly doesn't make himself palatable for Mrs. Brisby, but he does end up helping her out in the end by recommending to speak to the rats of NIMH. But before she has a chance to speak to any of them, she has to confront the guard.
I was told to see Nicodemus. Are you Nicodemus?
Moments of scratches and cuts are hardly downplayed in the movie. Compared to Disney's own dark animated feature of the same decade, The Black Cauldron, NIMH is certainly worlds apart from anything that Disney would have produced at the time. From producer Jeffrey Katzenberg, who additionally conjured up the idea for The Lion King, brought us The Prince of Egypt from DreamWorks Animation. With there being a 4-year absence from Katzenberg's last animated movie, Prince of Egypt was certainly a triumphant return for him. For years at Disney, Katzenberg had been trying to push to adapt the biblical story of Moses. His rationale was that he felt that it would be an incredibly different story for the animation medium. It's certainly an unfiltered adaptation to the biblical text. But the filmmakers as well add their own spin to the story, adding a lot of tension and drama between the brothers of Moses and Ramesses. The stance they have, it doesn't bring either one of them any joy. Like, yes, of course, Ramesses is absolutely in the wrong for enslaving the Hebrews, but as distant as they both may be now, they still see each other as brothers. But at the cost of trying to free the Hebrews, Moses will go to any length. One of the most traumatic moments that happen in the story is the plague of death that takes the firstborn. There's no music that's played throughout the sequence. All we get is the whispers of the spirits, and by the end, the outcry for those who lost their firstborn. When Ramesses loses his only child, Ramesses finally gives in and allows Moses and his people to go free. Moses does try to show comfort, but at the cost of what Ramesses has had to lose, he can't sincerely look at Moses anymore. Okay, so for a short while in my childhood, I didn't like going to theme parks. And that was because I had an irrational fear that I'd be transformed into an Aquanicus Sinus. Or just a donkey, as I hear that they're frequently called. Anyway, that fear developed thanks to me watching Pinocchio at a very small age. That transformation scene with Lamprick still gets me every time. Pinocchio was Walt Disney's second animated feature, and it's certainly quite interesting watching it back on retrospect. It's certainly a Disney film that doesn't have the Disney tropes of today. In a modern Disney film, you would expect to see Pinocchio save all the boys turn into donkeys, and honest John and Gideon to get their comeuppance, along with the coachman and Stromboli. Except, no, that doesn't happen. All of the villains pretty much go off living their everyday life, with no repercussions. The closest that we ever get to anything like that in the film is when Monstro face plants into the side of the cliff. But even still, he could have still very easily swam off and lived another day. What did I say earlier about Scar being the closest Disney villain to get away with it? Yeah, forget that. Pinocchio has to at least be one of the only Disney movies where the villains end up getting their own happy ending. As for the children transformed into donkeys, God knows what happens to them. Help, I'm a Fish was a Danish animated movie released in the year of 2000. The plot, for the most part, is fairly light-hearted, being about 3 kids that are transformed into aquatic animals via a potion that was conjured up by a scientist. However, the formula ends up in the hands of a fish named Joe. Him and his dim-witted shark friend use the potion to create a fish army. From there, he plots to take over the oceans. When I first saw this film as a child, there were 2 moments that stood out to me for being pretty disturbing. It comes where our hero, Fly, talks the villain Joe into drinking more of the potion. The more he drinks, the more human he becomes. And this all happens while they're underwater.
Can a human breathe underwater?
Of course not!
It's a very creative but morbid villain death for a family film. There's another very intense and scary moment that happens near towards the end of the film. The whole family come across the body of Fly, still stuck as a fish. His cousin Chuck frantically tries to figure out a way around this, going through vials and bottles to see if there's a reversible antidote. Chuck's mother tries to comfort her son, but in the struggle, this happens.
No! Hey! Over here!
Okay, so it turned out that wasn't Fly, he had already reverted back as a human, and the fish that Chuck was holding was just a fake one. But all I will say that even though after all these years I do know the outcome to the end of that scene, it still makes me gag every time I watch it. When you were a kid, did you ever have that one movie where you only ever saw it once in your childhood because you found it too scary or upsetting? Well, for me, that was Monster House. What really threw me off about the movie was Nevercracker and his backstory with his wife. I think I just didn't like the moment where she was killed off. Yeah, baby Scribbles, he didn't like people being killed off. I was probably too young to really enjoy Monster House when it initially came out. But overall, it's a great horror film for kids, or should I say, for older kids. Ever since I was a teenager, every couple of Halloweens, I do often revisit this film. I couldn't decide on this one, so I put it as a three-way tie between Animal Farm, Watership Down, and Plague Dogs. All of them being British films and based on animal books, and as well being slightly unfiltered when compared to the typical American animated film. With the exception of Watership Down and Plague Dogs being made by the same team, all of the movies aren't really connected. but I like to think of them as an unofficial spiritual trilogy. For nearly the span of 30 years, these were the types of mainstream animated movies being produced in Britain. And here we are, the #1 movie that scared me most as a kid was The Secret of Tom Thumb. Directed by filmmaker Dave Borthwick, the film initially started as a 10-minute short. Made back in 1992, it was meant to initially air on BBC Two during the Christmas season. However, it was turned down for being too dark. Although, after the film had been successful in film festivals, the BBC reconsidered. They aired it on BBC One in 1993, and the 10-minute short was extended to a 1-hour film. The story starts with a couple living in poverty. They have a child who is a miniature size. The kid is named Tom. Sadly, Tom is kidnapped and is sent to a laboratory filled with all sorts of unusual creatures. Tom is assisted with one of the quadrupedal creatures. They escape and wind up in a village filled with other people of a similar size to Tom. Tom's new friend doesn't make it very far into the film. Oh goodness, poor bugger. Tom teams up with one of the villagers, Jack, as they plot to infiltrate the laboratory. Even though this movie traumatized me as a kid, I've got a really strong nostalgic love for the movie. The puppets and even the live action actors are all done in stop motion. There's no other feature-length movie I can think of that's done anything like this. It's so unique, I just love revisiting it. But I'm certainly not going to pretend that this movie is everybody's cup of tea. I wouldn't watch it if I was having a bad day. It's definitely not a feel-good movie. Even other films like Lion King and Watership Down had a light of optimism to follow. It's not a wholesome story, and you have to be in the right frame of mind to watch it. Anyway, I won't divulge any more about the plot, as the less you know about going into this movie, you'll find the ending far more impactful.